picture of a painting that was made about 2,000 years ago, deep in the darkness of a stone cave in India. Where do you think it is now? Not in the British Museum, not in the Central Bank of India, not in a vault for ancient artifacts, but rather as an advanced photographic film using nanotechnology. It's buried in an abandoned mine beneath the ice of the North Pole. Of course, not the painting itself, not even a regular printed copy of it, but a highly detailed, digitized photograph of that painting has been stored on a film with a lifespan of over 500 years, and is now kept in the Arctic World Archive on the island of Svalbard, Norway, a place where even NASA's and the Vatican's data are stored. So what made a photograph of an old painting reach such a status? What is it about this painting? What's the story of the Ajanta Caves anyway? Why did an Indian art historian named Benoy B.L. decide to photograph these works, and that too in low light and without a flash? And why on earth should we bury such photos in the Arctic ice? To find the answers to these questions, stay with me until the end of the video. But if I were to give you just a little intriguing teaser of the story, I'd say it all truly started with a tiger hunt in the 19th century and ultimately ended up with nanotechnology in the Arctic. We head to the silent, towering cliffs of India. Somewhere among those cliffs, there are caves that date back to the 5th century AD. But what makes these caves even more fascinating are the murals and carved statues of Bodhisattvas. It's truly important to know that in Buddhism, a Bodhisattva is a compassionate person who has come very close to achieving enlightenment and attaining full Buddhahood. But instead of entering nirvana and achieving complete liberation, they consciously choose to remain in the world to help other living beings reach enlightenment as well. In short, images of bodhisattvas and prominent Buddhist figures like Padmapani and Vajrapani were carved onto the doors, walls, and columns of the Ajanta Caves. Faces that seem to speak out from the heart of 1,000 years of silence. Let me just add in parentheses that the Ajanta Caves, in total, consist of 30 rock-cut caves carved in the shape of a large horseshoe into the cliffs of the Waghra River Valley in the state of Maharashtra, India. You heard that right. These caves were carved out. That means they are entirely man-made, not natural. In fact, about 2,200 years ago, Buddhist artists and monks began carving these caves by hand and with primitive tools like hammers and chisels, cutting into the hard mountain rocks to create them. An interesting fact about these caves is that they were carved from top to bottom with millimeter precision, so that the ceilings and columns would align perfectly. This is exactly the opposite of what we use in construction today. In modern construction, we use an additive method, meaning we add materials one by one to build the structure. In other words, we build the framework using ready-made materials like concrete, cement, brick, steel, and wood, constructing from the bottom up. First the foundation, then the walls, the ceiling, electrical wiring, the facade, and so on step by step. We even use advanced tools like cranes, welding machines, lasers, GPS, and 3D construction printers. But the Ajanta Caves were built with the simplest tools and a subtractive method. That is, they started with a massive mountain and gradually carved things out from within it. So, the Ajanta Caves themselves are one of the masterpieces of rock-cut architecture in human history. These 30 caves are divided into two main types: Buddhist monasteries or viharas, which include large rooms for monks to live in with side chambers, and prayer halls called Chaityagrihas, with tall columns and dome spaces for worship. An important point is that light was never a permanent guest in these caves, and for years, darkness kept these masterpieces hidden. That was until 1819, when a British officer named John Smith, who had gone tiger hunting in the forests of Maharashtra, came across one of these caves. This discovery seemed accidental, but it opened one of the greatest gateways to the world of ancient Indian art. Interestingly, Smith even carved his own name along with the date of the discovery onto one of the statues inside the cave. So in a way, on April 28, 1819, John Smith himself became a part of Ajanta's history. However, after this discovery, preserving these works became a major challenge. In the early 1990s, an Indian art expert and filmmaker named Benoy Bell, who specialized in documenting and preserving ancient arts, managed to take the first precise, flash-free photographs of the Ajanta Cave paintings using a special technique. It's interesting to know that in the Ajanta Caves, natural light is very scarce, almost complete darkness. On the other hand, since using flash is prohibited to prevent damage to the paintings, Benoy Bell was able to capture clear, reflection-free photos by using a long exposure technique and carefully adjusting the color temperature of the light. You should know that long exposure means keeping the camera's shutter open longer, so it can absorb more light, for example, several seconds or even several minutes, not just a fraction of a second like in regular photography. Because in places like the Ajanta Caves where there's very little light, or for night photography, if you use normal settings, the image will turn out dark and lacking in detail. But with long exposure, the image becomes brighter and clearer. And this is in situations where even the human eye can't see properly. On the other hand, to prevent the photo from getting blurry, the camera has to be completely still. That's why they put the camera on a tripod. Now, let me tell you a bit about precisely adjusting the color temperature of the light. Actually, the color temperature of light is a scientific measure describing its color. When a photographer takes a picture, they set the ambient light's color, because this has a big impact on the colors in a photo. Meaning, if the setting isn't correct, the photos might look too blue, too yellow, or just unnatural. So, BL measured the low light inside the cave and set the camera so that the colors in the photos would be captured completely natural and true to life. Now, the story gets even more interesting from here on out. After taking the photos, BL did a precise pixel-by-pixel digital scan of these images. But the story didn't end there either. The photos were stored using nanotechnology on a very special and advanced silver film called PiqlFilm. In fact, this PiqlFilm is a special type of film developed by the Norwegian company PiqL for preserving digital information in physical form. Instead of storing regular photos, this film stores digital data, like text, images, documents, and files. So, if technology changes in the future, the textual information can still be scanned and retrieved. In fact, right now, this information is also visible to the naked eye. That means the person can read it, and it can also be retrieved by a digital scanner. Since this film is physical, not online, it's resistant to cyber attacks. It's also resistant to magnetism, radiation, power outages, and the passage of time. They say this film has a lifespan of over 500 years, but in a cold, dark polar environment, it can last even longer. That's why it's perfect for storing vital and historical information. Now let me tell you under what conditions and where they keep this special film. These photos are currently stored in a cold, dry underground place called the Arctic World Archive on the island of Svalbard in the Arctic. It's a place where the world's important information is preserved with incredible security. This means that the 2,000-year-old Ajanta paintings have been stored as photographs on a highly advanced film in an extremely secure place, which is basically designed to preserve the memory of human civilization, so that future generations can also see them. When John Smith accidentally entered Ajanta Cave number 10 in 1819, many of the paintings were still intact, but from that time until the 20th century, with the arrival of tourists, humidity, smoke, light, restoration mistakes, and neglect, the paintings were severely damaged and became hidden under layers of pollution and deterioration. However, in recent studies on the paintings of the Ajanta Caves, researchers discovered that some of the pigments contain extremely fine particles at the nanoscale, and this very feature has helped the artworks in these caves survive for centuries. But unfortunately, after this treasure was discovered, due to torches or even visitors' breath in this enclosed environment, soot accumulated on these artworks. Also, because the cave is dark, moss and microorganisms have grown on the paintings. And worst of all, in the 20th century, in an attempt to protect the paintings, they applied a layer called shellac on them, which instead of preserving them, made the paintings shiny, sticky, and dark so that their details couldn't be seen. But since the 1990s, a restoration team came in and, using new technologies, especially infrared light, started cleaning these layers. In fact, infrared light can pass through some of the dark layers and in a way, recover the image underneath. After using infrared and careful cleaning, for the first time in centuries, the details of the paintings created during the time of Buddha emerged from the darkness. Of course, a little earlier, as I mentioned, the BL building also played its part in preserving this work. But the current measures taken to preserve these caves include removing invasive plants and repairing cracks, controlling temperature and humidity to protect the paintings, limiting visitor contact by installing signs and barriers, and digitally documenting the caves with 3D scans and high-quality images. You should also know that the Ajanta Caves are famous for their sculptures and carvings, and the pillars and walls of the caves are decorated with very fine and intricate engravings. But these works aren't just religious images. Each one is full of details about the life, culture, and even the trade relations of their own time. It's as if you're opening a window into the world of 1,500 years ago. For example, in the paintings related to the Jataka tales, which are stories of Buddha's previous lives, we see scenes of kings, families, ordinary people, eating, parties, and even the marketplace. More specifically, in the story of Mahajanaka Jataka, a royal banquet is depicted, featuring food, drinking cups, and the company of female musicians. On the other hand, in many scenes, especially in Caves 1, 2, and 16, women are seen playing traditional instruments or dancing. These images show that music and dance held an important place in the culture of that time. Additionally, in several paintings, especially in Cave 17, there are people depicted with clothing, skin tones, and hairstyles that clearly belong to other cultures. Researchers say that some of those long, shawl-like garments or fur coats resemble the clothing of Central Asian or Iranian people. Some of them also have darker skin or curly hair, which resembles people from East Africa. These are signs of the presence of foreign traders or diplomats in Indian courts. In addition, the bright and unique blue color used in parts of the paintings, according to chemical analyses, was made from the gemstone lapis lazuli, which at that time could only be obtained from mines in Afghanistan or northeastern Iran. This means that during that era, India was not an isolated country, but rather the center of an international trade network and actually had active trade routes with these regions. Moreover, the use of lapis blue in the Ajanta paintings further confirms that the artists of that era were in pursuit of both beauty and quality. It's important to know that the colors used in these paintings are natural pigments, which indicates a high level of awareness of artistic techniques at that time. Additionally, even though the inside of the cave is dark, these colors shine brilliantly, from mossy green to pale yellow and the delicate lapis blue. On the other hand, the techniques used in the paintings, such as perspective, chiaroscuro, and symmetry, were truly pioneering and innovative for their time. More importantly, contrary to what we might expect, encountering scenes of asceticism in most religious sites, in the Ajanta Caves, we are met with images of lavish lives, royal courts, elegantly dressed people, music, dance, and worldly pleasures. Because in Buddhist culture, life is not a linear path with a clear beginning and end, but rather a continuous cycle. That's why an elephant can be reborn as Queen Ben's in Cave 10 in its next life, but its spirit remains the same, depicted with the same beauty and character, just like everyone else. In short, each of the Ajanta paintings is like a historical mystery, and of course, there are various theories about them. Some people say that the fact that a photographic copy of these paintings is now preserved on silver film is a very important achievement. But in today's world, having just one physical copy is no longer enough. It's better for the information to be stored in various archives so that cultural data can be constantly updated and preserved in several secure locations around the world. Of course, it's even better if this happens in real time, which is called a real-time archive. Some people are also concerned about whether the nanotechnology used to convert digital images to PiqlFilm meets UNESCO standards or global digital archiving standards. In other words, is this nanotech conversion completely safe and acceptable in terms of resolution, durability, and the possibility of future retrieval? Critics also say that while it's true that the photographic copies of these paintings are currently safe on Svalbard Island, what if the polar ice melts? What if there's an earthquake? In my opinion, these critics have a point in a way. it's true that all of these are somewhat far-fetched risks. But when you're preserving thousand-year-old artistic treasures for future generations, you have to consider everything. What do you think? Be sure to write in the comments so I can see what you think. The ancient Buddhist paintings of Ajanta in Western India depict elephants, ornate crowns, precious jewels, flowers, jars of wine and water, female musicians, foreigners with helmets, and religious symbols. Because of their incredible beauty, they are considered a highly valuable historical document. Therefore, we must do whatever we can to preserve such treasures by any means possible. But the story of saving the ancient Buddhist paintings of Ajanta also carries a great lesson. If science and technology are combined with respect for history and art, they can save a world of human treasures.